Mm. 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 Why are you so? reason. One. Good evening. You guys hear me? You may have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can hear you. Let me turn off the video. Hello, Sharon.
We're going to get up and say we're
This is interesting because everybody's learned how to use Zoom a certain way, and now we're going to tell you to use it differently. So it makes it a little challenging because trying to explain to people that we're going to two systems, that Zoom is just feeding the panel part of it and is attaching to the other part. So there's our big challenge is the transition to get to the other part, and I'm trying to figure out how I can be completely invisible because I'm usually not part of the conversation. I'm just the tech guy, but I keep having a screen. I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of that, but I'm not there yet. So
No problem.
it seems to be a pretty good conversation going on in the OVEE part, though.
The actual movie goes on for what, another 15 minutes or so?
Where are we at? We are, let me look real quick. You have about maybe 10 minutes, I think.
Oh, okay.
Maybe a little less than that.
Almost there.
Let me save my timeline. Yeah, probably closer to where are we at? Yeah, maybe 6 minutes.
Okay.
So we're pretty close.
Sharon, how are you doing?
I'm still listening to the thing to get questions for you guys, but I'm doing okay.
Sorry, I was speaking. I forgot to put my headphones back in.
Oh, I'm still on the movie, kind of putting in comments and grabbing questions.
Okay, great. Hello, Jeff. Good to see you.
No money. No money. It is a system that works, and it works without picking on poor people or treating them any differently for the things that they have done or they may do. Let us be clear. This is a movement. People put us here.
Currently, we have about, I think, 4 minutes before we come to you. So
Come from movements.
and just remind everybody to either mute or turn off your OV portion, which was the screen where you were watching the movie at. Otherwise, we'll get a really bad echo. But we still got a couple minutes, so. Hello, Miriam.
Hello.
I almost forgot to come in. I was so in the,
Yeah, it's a good movie.
yeah.
Hey there, Miriam.
Hi.
I'm Jeff Gorder.
Yes. Hi, Jeff. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. You're out at Shasta College, huh?
I am at Shasta College.
What do you do out there?
You know, I work for the Shasta College TRIO office, TRIO Student Support Services office. We kind of like help first generation and low income or student with different abilities who want to transfer to a four-year university.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Great.
Magnus, hi. I'm Jeff Gorder. I followed some of your work at PPIC.
Oh, good, good. Don't
As
hold
a-
it against me, though.
Not
It
at
made me
all.
write it.
Not at all. I was a former public defender here in Shasta County, so
I know. Well,
followed.
yeah, I'm good. It's great to hear that, our work is being read, and especially by someone in a position like yours.
Absolutely. I mean, I still keep in touch with the research, and interested in seeing what the post realignment world is like, and
Then it requires constant attention in that case, because it's a moving target. It's a lot of changes here in California.
oh, I know, it's been incredible in the last 10 years
10 years.
11 years.
Yeah.
We have about, excuse me, gentlemen, and Miriam, we actually have about 2 minutes. So till we come to you.
Okay. So, and we have Larry. So
Good to
I
see you,
think I
man.
usually just ask you guys to introduce yourselves and what you do. Aren't we supposed to have 2 more people? Where are Step Up?
Yeah, Robert Bowen was just here, and Raymond was just here as well. So I don't know what
Yes.
happened to them, but they were both here earlier. So
Yeah, I don't see them.
maybe they'll pop in shortly.
Okay, they're still in the room. So
So I take it that the participants or the viewers of the movie can log into this discussion. Is that correct?
yes, they will be sending me questions and putting some on the Q&A, and I would be asking you those questions. And we have Raymond, Curtis, and
Hey, Miriam, I put them in the chat. Do you want the rest in the Q&A?
it's okay in the chat. And yeah, it's okay in the chat. So you all can actually see the questions in the chat. In case my accent makes it hard for you to understand what I'm saying, it happens a lot. So it's nice to have it right there.
Got it.
Hi, Robert. Hi, Victoria.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Good evening.
Hi, Robert.
Hey there.
Yes, Julie, we are ready.
How you doing, Raymond?
I'm well, thank you. How are you? Who's speaking?
Jeff Gorder. I enjoyed reading your comments on the chat.
I've done a lot of thinking about this sort of stuff.
I'll bet.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you here, Raymond. I think you experience some of the stuff that they've kind of like talked about. I try to not push panelists, but if you can share as much as you would like. I'm still not. Are we on yet?
Hold on.
Now you are.
Okay. So thank you. here we are for the discussion, community discussion for Philly DA. What a timely time. It's great that we're going through that right now. My name is Miriam Kalmogo, and I've been facilitating these discussions because I learn a lot. And yeah, so here we are. We have some, gosh, great panelists. And I don't know if my brain is gonna be kind of like, my head is gonna be able to kind of like carry my brain.
Yes.
I know I'm gonna leave here really with lot of knowledge. So I'm gonna go with the screen what I have here. I'll start with Jeff. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Okay, Miriam, thank you. My name's Jeff Gorder. Was a criminal defense attorney for most of my career, about 30 years. And quite a bit of that was done in a public defender role. I spent the last 13 years of my career in the Shasta County Public Defender's Office, the last 9 of those as the head of that particular department, and retired in 2018. And I still keep in touch. I read Magnus's papers over at PPIC. And, there's been a tremendous amount of change in the criminal justice system. So this topic was really interesting to me. So that's my background.
Thank you. Yeah, what an honor to have you. So we'll go to Magnus.
Great. It's great to be here and nice to be here with all of you. Magnus Lofstrom. I am Policy Director and Senior Research Fellow at the Nonpartisan Independent Public Policy Institute of California. So I head up a team of criminal justice researchers. We do data-driven policy analysis of a variety of criminal justice outcomes, ranging from police stops to arrests to incarceration, crime rates to recidivism. And it's a relatively new area for us at PPIC. We've been doing this for the last decade or so, and started when California implemented realignment in 2011. And since then, we have seen so many criminal justice reforms in California. So it's kept us busy trying to keep track of what's happening in our system and how these reforms have impacted a variety of outcomes. So great to be here.
Thank you. Nice to have you. And we'll go with Larry Homestead.
Thank you, Miriam, and a real pleasure to be here and with a very distinguished panel. I'm the president and CEO of United Way of Northern California. Our territory is 9 Northern California counties, including Shasta County, where we're based in Redding. United Way of Northern California is the coordinating agency for the Shasta Equal Justice Coalition, which has been meeting since last June in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, working with, speaking with, engaging with the law enforcement community in Shasta County in hopes of pursuing some reforms in our county. United Way of Northern California is also the convener of the North State Equity Fund, which seeks to fund agencies throughout our region that are working on issues of social justice, racial justice, social equity.
Thank you, Larry. Victoria?
Hi, my name is Victoria Gemmel. I'm honored to be a part of this panel with you all. I'm actually Pitt River, Wentunyana, and Athabascan, so I currently walk and reside on the land of my ancestors, which is here in Shasta County. I'm just here as I've had many jobs in my life. I just want to state that I am here to speak on my own feelings, and I'm not representing anyone at this moment other than through my experiences. And I'm just happy to be here so that we can evolve and what we can create from this moment and the collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Raymond.
Hello, everybody. My name is Raymond Curtis. I am a formerly incarcerated person who was afforded an opportunity to pursue higher education through the Shasta College STEP. And I'm here to tell you that it's made all of the difference in the world for a person like me. I came up against the wall, as I often had many times in my life, where I was in front of a judge. They had me cold. I deserved what the district attorney was trying to give me, which was 10 years in prison. The public defender in that case didn't really have much of a defense for me. They had me cold. The sympathetic judge said, you know what, I believe in programs. I believe that even a fellow like this might be amenable to a program. So she gave me 1/3 of a year, 120 days to kind of get my head straight, and then gave me a 14-month court-ordered program. Now, I'd received programs in lieu of prison time before, but what made the difference this time was when I was coming up to the end of the program and they were about to pull back their controls from me, I was offered this opportunity to pursue a higher education at Shasta College through the Step Up program. And I found that sitting in the behavioral health court program that I was involved in, at least I learned how to sit at a table in a room full of other people, which was a transferable skill that dovetailed nicely with the college education. And because I'm not required to be at the college, I'm sort of internalizing the controls for myself. I'm there because I want to be, and I'm actually building a future for myself that I'm invested in, that I'm looking forward to the outcome of, that has hope and potential, and makes everything that I used to do with my life pale in comparison. So I'm also part of a student-led organization called Club SOAR.
Thank you, Curtis. I'm looking forward to hearing about what you have to say later on. Now we have Robert.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Robert Bowman, and I am the program director for the Shasta College Step Up program. Step Up is one of the few programs in California, and certainly also in the United States, that is currently providing restorative justice through education for formerly incarcerated and justice impacted students. We are an alternative custody program, which means that we take folks that are on work release, active probation. I have folks that are on parole in my program, as well as folks that haven't been in trouble with the law in 20 years. We provide limited financial support, a ton of academic, administrative, and logistical support to students to help them through the process. We are going into our 7th year, coming out of our 6th, going to our 7th. And so far we have been very successful. We've, and the 6 years we've been doing this, we have graduated over 110 students. Our recidivism rate right now for all students is 18%, just a tad under 19 actually. But for graduates in our program, it's 6.42. That is monumental when you look at the recidivism rate in California as a whole, the United States as a whole, as well as our county. We have students from Tehama, Trinity, Shasta, and I even have a couple of students that are transferred to our probation from other counties, Glenn and Modoc, that are on our caseload here in Shasta. So into what Mr. Krasner was talking about in his campaign and what he wanted to instill that type of change in the district attorney's office, and that we focus on in addition to vocational programs like welding and logging, heavy equipment and auto, as well as academic issues. So I have, students that are in sociology classes and psychology. So I know that Raymond will tell you a little bit about his journey. He is one of our heavy equipment students, as well as doing some GIS stuff. So he's super techie and much more intelligent than I am. And before I turn it back over to you, Miriam, I want to give a shout out to Eva Jimenez, our Associate Vice President of Economic and Workforce Development. Eva is the one that founded Step Up the year or two before I got here in 2016. So without her vision and the type of change that you saw in the film, and then kind of turning the reins over to folks like me and our current Dean of Student Services, Sandra Hamilton Slane, who carries on that vision, this type of thing wouldn't happen. So I would be remiss if I didn't thank Eva, Sandra, and our president, Joe Wise, for their vision and support in doing something like this.
Thank you, Robert. We also have Sharon. Sharon will be feeding me the questions, and she also will be putting them on the chat for you to see. I'll be trying to take more questions from the community, so they'll be sending those questions. I do have a number of questions that I would also ask. But the first one that we got is, how do you build trust with the community in the criminal justice system? So Larry, you wanna take that? I know that you are working on issues around trust.
Yeah, well, thank you, Miriam. And trust is to me, a fairly straightforward concept. It involves living up to your word. It involves a feeling that if you help me, I will help you. It involves communications. And I think it involves honest communications. So I think that to me, a starting point is transparency. Mm-hmm. And a starting point is two-way dialogue. I know as we do our work in the Equal Justice Coalition, one of the things that we have done to start with is to reach out to our key law enforcement leaders in Shasta County. We've done a lot of work in particular with the Reading Police Department and its Chief Schuler. We've had conversations of one sort or another with the district attorney, the county sheriff, the probation director, and others. And what we find is that there's a willingness to engage in conversation, but there's also a reluctance that you might always find in almost any system, but certainly the criminal justice system, of understanding that there's political dynamics, which are really critical. I think the Philly DA piece really illustrates the impact of that. There's political dynamics to each aspect of this. There's cultural dynamics. There's the dynamics of, hey, I'm running an organization and I need to be careful about what I say, who I say it to. You saw the whole piece about fraternal order of police, for instance, unions that you have to worry about, et cetera. So what you have is that the information that goes out to the public and the information that is needed to establish that trust, sometimes it's hard to get at that. There's a reluctance to put everything on the table sometimes in a way that would engender that trust. So to me, the beginning part is how do we break down those walls of information and get more transparency and get more public and civilian oversight and involvement in the administration of justice.
Thank you, Larry. Magnus, you want to add to this, or anyone else?
I don't know. I think it's, I think Larry put it very well. I think it's a complex process and it requires a lot. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think the important question is, are we taking steps towards building up that trust? And I think, broadly, what I really appreciate about this show, trying to, tie in our conversation to the show as well, is You know, we're seeing all these issues that Larry Krasner is facing in Philadelphia. We see what he's trying to do, and broadly, it's trying to reduce reliance on incarceration. That's part of this. And when we look at what we're doing here in California, I think there is a time to be proud of what we're doing here in California, because we are leaders when it comes to criminal justice reforms. There's no other state that has made as big of changes to their criminal justice reform as we have over the last decade or so. We have, reduced our incarcerated population tremendously through efforts like realignment in 2011. We have Prop 36 that changed our 3 strikes law. We have Prop 47 that reclassified a number of drug and property offenses from a felony or wobblers to misdemeanors. There's a whole string of these reforms, and we reduced in those efforts, and there's a number of others, we reduced our incarcerated population by roughly about 20%. That's a significant decrease. And the pandemic itself has reduced our, and those efforts reduced our incarceration rate to below the national average. We're relatively low reliance on incarceration in California. So we've made a lot of the changes that Larry is looking for in Philadelphia, not completely, but we've certainly moved in that direction. But then with the pandemic, we've been forced through public health concerns to reduce prison and jails population further. And in fact, if you look at the peak of our jail and prison populations in California, which is around 2008, we had about 260,000 people incarcerated in state prisons and county jails. With the reforms that I mentioned and the pandemic itself, which has reduced our prison population and jail population by 43,000, that's a drop of 100,000. That's a tremendous decrease, right? It puts our incarceration rate at like 300 something, which is well below the national average. So that's great. But here's I think it's always like putting it in perspective is important. How does that compare to the rest of the world then? We have our neighbors to the north, Canada, they have an incarceration rate of 100. We have in California, through all that progress, we're still in the high 300s. So even with those efforts, it's still a huge reliance on incarceration, even in a progressive state like California. And the question is, what else are we doing to reduce that reliance, because it's a costly reliance as well. And I think as we're trying to figure out what are those effective ways to do that are safe, that do not jeopardize public safety, in those efforts, all those conversations, building up community trust is going to be a big part of it, and it will also help by us moving in that direction. So.
Thank you.
And I would just
Miriam,
I just add one thing, Miriam.
Okay.
I was just going to say a key factor in instilling trust in the community is ensuring fairness. And that is primarily what you see driving a lot of these progressive DA's offices, is the idea that the system is unfair at this point, that people are treated differently in the system based on wealth, poverty, based on race, etc. So the more that we can find ways to make the system fair and create, less disparity in terms of racial outcomes, less disparity in terms of wealth outcomes. People see that. If they believe that the system is fair, then that enhances trust. So, you see a lot of efforts in terms of eliminating cash bail or reforming cash bail to make it more equitable for poor people. To address some of the racial disparities that exist in arrests, charges, sentencing, incarceration, etc. The more the community sees that fairness is being taken into account, I think trust will go up tremendously.
We have a lot of questions coming in. It's so the next question is, I think, what % of Shasta County inmates are there because they were unable to post bail why would you, Jeff, you were the DA. Can you kind of like give a roughly a number? What would you say?
Well, I was the public defender, actually.
Oh.
So I was on the other side, but
You were on the other side.
typically, I would say 60 to 70% of the inmates in Shasta County Jail would be pretrial. That is unsentenced.
Yeah.
In on some kind of a bail or a no bail situation. That's been pretty much the case as far as I can remember. It's a huge percentage of people. No, it's a very small percentage of people in county jail that are actually serving a sentence, surprisingly. Now, that may have changed because there have been, as Magnus said, COVID has dramatically changed the landscape. The state prisons are no longer accepting prison sentenced individuals from county jail. So if you're sentenced to state prison in Shasta County, chances are you're sitting in Shasta County Jail for many, many months now because the prisons are not taking anybody because they're trying to reduce their populations to keep it safe in light of COVID. And there's also bail reforms that are occurring. There was a recent California Supreme Court case that just came down that should dramatically affect the number of people that are sitting in jail pre-trial. They should be getting out on bail or being released on some other kind of pre-trial program, home monitoring, electronic monitoring, something along those lines.
That was actually one of the questions about the recent Supreme Court ruling on bail. So you kind of like touched on that.
Yeah, basically what, and Magnus, I haven't read the case in total, but it basically indicates that there's a liberty interest that we all have, and we're presumed innocent until
proven guilty.
Until proven guilty, right? We're presumed innocent. So you have a liberty interest. Well, why are people sitting in jail when they're presumed innocent? Well, the bail system started up as a way of ensuring it was to guarantee that people would make their court appearances, essentially. And the idea was that if you put up some money or property that you would lose if you didn't show up in court, then you would have an incentive to make your court appearances. Later, that changed where the court could consider a public safety concern also. They might just set an extremely high bail on you if they thought you were a danger to public safety if you were to get out pending your trial. Well, the court has basically said those are unconstitutional. You can't just detain people and take away their freedom without certain restrictions and guidelines. So, number one, I think the general rule, people should be released. If bail is going to be set, if the court believes that bail is necessary to ensure one's court appearance or to protect public safety, they have to take into consideration the person's ability to pay the bail. In the past, there was no need to consider one's ability to pay. The court might set bail at $10,000, regardless of whether one could pay it or not. So the rich man could get out by posting bail, whereas the poor person would have to stay in jail. Well, now the court has to consider an individual's financial circumstances, which makes sense because $1,000 to one person is not much, whereas $1,000 to another person is a lot of money. So that will have to be taken into consideration now by the judge, and the only way they can keep somebody in on a public safety concern is finding clear and convincing evidence that that person poses a risk to public safety. So it's going to be a much higher threshold to meet to keep people in.
I think that's the big unknown right there. What does clear and convincing evidence mean? How are you establishing clear and convincing evidence, which probably moves us towards risk assessment. And it still means that there's a lot of decisions that'll be made on how you define these things. So it's going to be, it will be very interesting. I think that it leaves a lot of discretion to the counties and the judges in how they're going to implement this. The affordability side of it is also not defined by the Supreme Court ruling. So that's another part. How do you define that? What is affordability in this context? It's going to be very interesting. And you know, we already rejected, you know, eliminating cash bail in our election in November of last year. And part of the reason, part of the concern that was raised, I don't think that people believe that cash bail is necessarily the most effective way to maintain public safety and ensure, you know, that individuals appearing in court, is that what it would do is that we will move towards risk assessment in these situations. So use an algorithm to determine what kind of risk someone is. That uses data. And the concern was that, well, the data itself is going to reflect biases. And so we might actually see greater biases if we implement something like that. And so these are all the questions that we're going to be grappled with now in the future. I think it is an extremely important ruling. It's going to be interesting to see what the state legislature will do as well.
Thank you. Victoria, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the bail situation and how it is an issue, especially with individuals who are still being held in the jails pending trial. I know of a few individuals here in Shasta County that are in there over 3-4 years. Another issue that creates is we need to stop these time waivers. It's just cruel punishment to all parties in the case. And where is the justice in that, especially if, like we're saying, they're innocent until proven guilty? I understand that there's stipulations that may have caused them to still sit in the jail, but should they win their cases, how do you justify that? I mean, 4 years is a long time. And
I just was made aware of a guy that Victoria in that line, a guy that just went to trial, had been in for 3 years and was acquitted.
Yeah.
You know, and you think about it's very costly. Even the county jail, I believe their estimate is that it's probably, you know, $40,000 a year to house an inmate. Not only that, I mean, the cost to the public is astronomical. The cost of the defendant who sits in jail for 3 years pending trial is incalculable.
The other issue is, with me talking to some of the public defenders and DAs in this area, is the caseload that is given to each DA or caseload is just, it's a massive caseload. They are not able to do the due diligence that's needed in order to handle these cases. So I think that's another part of it. They're just overwhelmed and they can't really do what they need to do in order to handle these cases thoroughly.
Yeah. Thank you. What local advocacy groups and nonprofit interact directly with inmates, like in Shasta County?
I'm happy to take that one.
Yeah.
So
I was hoping you'll take that one.
Yeah. There are a number of groups that work. It kind of depends on what you define as advocacy. I mean, there are a number of, in the community, secular groups, but when you're talking about non-secular and things like that, there are, for instance, the Daily Reporting Center does that. A big one is our program. And then that we are, once the COVID lifts, we will go into the facility and begin offering classes. The unique thing about what we're doing in terms of using restorative justice or education is that we are
Can
truly
you explain what restorative justice means before you go on?
Sure. Restorative justice is a movement on justice that looks to combine the community, the victim, and the individual that was convicted of the offense as well. So it's kind of a comprehensive, holistic way. So it's focused on changing criminologic behavior, so the way they act, the way they think. It's focused on providing resources so they don't reoffend, reducing recidivism, which is what we do. And it's also focused on turning them into a contributing, productive member of our community. I know Jeff talked on it a little bit earlier. Right now, it's probably, after COVID, quite more expensive. But the last time I got data from the sheriff, it was $110 a day to keep someone in the Shasta County jail. It is much less expensive to educate that individual and, teach them a skill, a trade, an academic profession, so they can go out and be a mentor in their community and, positively impact others on the way. Our program partners with everyone from the Good Address Commission to probation, to parole, to law enforcement, CHIBA, the SMART Center, the Job Training Center in Red Bluff. So we're very much a comprehensive organization that looks to not only help people get the training, but to obtain jobs and have that support afterwards. So, one of the things that we do have in this county that I think that works really, really well are programs like the Addicted Offender Program that's run through the court, which is an amazing program that has had a ton of success, where folks are strictly monitored going through a program by the court, probation, and the district attorney's office, and the public defender. So it's kind of a comprehensive effort. That program has been wildly successful, at least in my experience with students that we have in common. So
what is the name of that program again?
It's the Addicted Offender Program. It's known as AOP.
Okay.
Yeah, and those are for folks that have serious charges that are looking at a lengthy prison sentence. And so they're given the choice to go through a rigorous program of rehabilitation, training, and monitoring through the court. It's a phased program. The other one that we have, and I will let Jeff and Magnus talk on this, because I am certainly not an attorney, but I am a beneficiary of Assembly Bill 109. So AB 109 for programs like ours is, at least in this community, has been a godsend. It created the Community Corrections Partnership, which is a partnership of the public defender, probation, the Reading Police Department, the sheriff, the courts, and they look at programs specifically designed to reduce recidivism, which came out of the federal lawsuits many years ago about the overcrowding in California's prisons. If you look at how successful that has been, along with COVID, recently, you probably saw an article on the local news. They're starting to close fire camps because they just don't have enough inmates to run them, to train in them. And so while that is a negative in one way, it's also a positive that we are, lowering that population overall and bringing them under our campus, where we at Shasta College can train them to be firefighters, and that kind of thing. So those are the types of organizations that are out there working with, the Hill communities, the North American mental health, to try to make a difference. So,
Magnus or Larry, you want to add something?
There are a lot of positive things going on, I think, in Shasta County. Let's speak to Shasta for a second. But I also don't want us to lose sight of, to me, the critical issue of the moment, which was around trust, and particularly around trust in law enforcement for people of color, people who might be part of the LGBTQ community.
Yep.
and there are a number of issues in Shasta County that I think are worth talking about. You know,
Yes.
I would start with, you know, Magnus gave a very good rundown of the issue of incarceration in the state, and we have definitely seen those numbers lower. But in Shasta County, we know we have one of the highest rates of incarceration of people encountering the criminal justice system or in jail in relation to it in the state. We also have the continuing issue of people of color, whether it's perception or reality, finding that their experience with law enforcement is different. And we know we live here in Shasta County and in the North State. You know, it's a predominantly Anglo population, where issues of color and race sometimes just don't seem to come to the surface for the majority population. And as we go through this whole discussion about, you know, we're as a nation watching what's happening in Minnesota and other places, and kind of, you know, very tense because, you know, we know that that's a reflection of a cultural phenomenon in terms of race that plays out throughout the nation. And in our community, specifically our Native American population, our Latino populations here in the North State, they have a whole different perception of this whole issue of race reform that we're talking about because their experience is different. So I think it's important that we keep that issue of trust front and center. And I'll leave it at that.
Can I add something to that? Because I think this is really important. You know, we're talking about the criminal justice system and the challenges that we face when it comes to that, and racial inequity is undoubtedly the biggest one there, I think. And I think, you know, being at a place like PPIC, we're very, very data driven. I like to throw out numbers. But just to get a sense of what that inequity looks like and how it changes throughout the system. We have Blacks in California represent about 6% of our population, 6%. Now we look at, all right, what about of those who are stopped by cops? What share of those stops are Blacks? It's about 15%. Move up then to arrest. Now you're at 16%. Yep. When you look at the jail population in California, about 25% of the jail population is Black. 6% of California's population is Black. Move to probation, add another percent. It's 26%. Now, when we look at the prison population, it's about 29% of the prison population is Black. That's incredible. And what it's telling us is that it's exacerbating throughout the system. There are inequities in the experiences just interacting with law enforcement. There's no doubt about that. But it actually gets worse throughout the system. Yeah. That's very troubling. But I think, again, you know, looking for, you know, this is not good news, right? But we need to look for ways to address these racial inequities. We're not going to solve that, I don't think, if we simply focus on the criminal justice system. We're going to have to look at, we have to look outside of this. This is a bigger problem in the criminal justice system. So we see it here, and it's a symptom of other issues that we need to address. Absolutely. But I think we have some promising stuff going on here. And I've been touting the reforms here as it's all good. And I should say that when we look at these things, there's some good things and there's some bad things about it. So when I look at Prop 47 realignment, these are big changes. We saw, you know, a decrease in our reliance on costly incarceration. It did have some impacts. I mean, we have estimated that increased property crimes, some property crimes as well. So we should not think that we can make all these dramatic changes without seeing any potentially negative impacts. We have to be smart about it and think about how do we make sure that they don't happen, and what are those alternative approaches, right? That's one thing that I want to say. The other part is that when we look at it from the racial disparity lens, what we saw that something like reclassifying drugs and property offenses from felony to misdemeanors, which is not really race motivated. It's just we're looking to further reduce our reliance on incarceration. That had a significant impact on racial disparity in arrests and bookings. It actually, not only that, actually reduced jail bookings by about 10%. which saves money. And again, keep in mind what I said about the crime side. There are some effects, but we have never seen so far any of our reforms having had an impact that they increase violent crime. That so far has not been found. So we're looking at some property crimes. But racial disparity actually decreased as a result of Prop 47. So those types of measures can, when we make those changes, can actually move us in the right directions. But even with those changes, we're still seeing big changes. And if we look at the incarceration rates and the gaps there over the last 10 years, we've seen notable improvements there as well. So the changes that we're taking is not only reducing reliance on incarceration, they're moving us towards less racial inequity. But the stats that I started to give you here, that's after these facts happen. So they're there and they're big now, but it tells us that we can move in the right direction and reduce racial inequity by carefully looking at the reforms, certain types of reforms, and some of those we've already implemented, but it gives us information and suggestions of where others can go as well to see improvement.
Miriam, just a quick interjection. I know you want to go to other people. First of all, I've really appreciated, Magnus, that layout of those statistics. I think those really tell the story. Jeff, you brought up the topic of trust earlier and fairness. Okay, as that, and so here's a data point that I saw that is kind of mind blowing. So police in America each year kill about 1,000 people. Okay, whether justified or justified, whatever, it's about 1,000. That's 1,000 people a year get shot and killed by police in America. Since 2005, and this is according to NAACP, 3 police officers have been convicted of murder for an on-duty shooting since 2005. Out of those 1,000 shootings a year, all the rest are either some have been, maybe another 30 have been convicted of some crime less than murder. The rest are pretty much justifiable shootings or what have you. So and now most people who get shot and killed by police are not people of color, actually, but people of color, as Magnus was pointing out, are disproportionately represented in that framework. So if you look at where the unrest and disparity and the lack of trust comes in when it comes to fairness, that's the kind of data point that people in brown and black people look at and say, whoa,
Mm-hmm. And they also look at who's investigating those shootings, right? And it typically is, a member of another law enforcement agency in the same jurisdiction or the DA's office. And there's probably a lack of trust in the fairness of the oversight and the investigation of those shootings. And, it's probably an area where some reforms could be implemented as well as to who's going to investigate those police shootings.
I definitely wanted to speak on that because even with our jail here, there were multiple deaths in the jail. And when I looked into it, I actually discovered that Shasta County basically investigates itself, which was very concerning to me. I thought it would have went to the Attorney General's office, but that wasn't the case. And another thing, this county actually has just a few years ago, when they came back with the report, we were the second highest in police versus civilian shootings in the state. And Redding's a small town, so that was very concerning. Another thing I wanted to ask Mangus, sorry, I slaughtered your name, but I wanted to ask if your group actually did any case studies on pre-charges versus after the preliminary charging and what the outcome of the trial charging was. Because I noticed in this area, many people have been initially charged with strikes. And that was very concerning to me. If people don't understand strikes, it seems very scary. And so a lot of people pleaded out so that they wouldn't have those strikes on their record. So I just was curious if if there's been any studies on that.
It's a really good question. Just these issues of prosecutorial discretion and how it goes through the process. So far, there really isn't, as far as I know, any research that has looked at that here in California, and it's primarily driven by data limitations. We now I have some of my colleagues who are going to look at this issue. We have data now that we think are quite suitable to better understand the things that you're talking about and see what that looks like. We're doing it in the context of the pandemic because there's been so many changes, and we're kind of going to look at how that played out, the pandemic itself, because there are dramatic changes, but those data goes to before the pandemic as well. So we're hoping in the near future to be able to give you a little bit more information about how that, what that looks like. And again, from that perspective of local differences, but also like any work that we will be doing in this area of criminal justice going forward, it will be with this lens of racial inequities as well. And stay tuned is what I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, what do you think that outsiders can reform a system from within? Thinking about Larry Krasner, who led, who was an activist who set out to end mass incarceration by taking over the agency at its center. Do you think that that's something that can happen here locally, like an outsider system, organization, person can make that kind of change?
Well, I could jump in on that. I mean, I think it's unlikely. I mean, that's my view, but because if you look at Krasner in Philadelphia, his base was not law enforcement. His base was not the police. His base was not the entrenched criminal justice players, the judges, the DAs, et cetera. I mean, it was the community of activists that were driving this change. My sense is that it doesn't exist in Shasta County like it would in Philadelphia or the larger urban areas. I mean, if these are happening, these progressive DAs are being elected in LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia. You're not seeing that to the same extent in a rural community like Shasta County, but certainly an insider or an outsider could come in and make a great deal of change, no doubt about it. But it's only possible if you have a community of activism like you had in Philadelphia or Chicago or these other large urban areas where people are aggrieved about the system. And I don't sense that same vibe or that same sentiment or feeling here in Shasta County, which is more of a rural law and order, lock them up community. I mean, I think these changes are occurring in the larger urban areas, and it will filter down to some extent to the smaller rural areas. But I think primarily this is an urban driven phenomenon that we're seeing.
I think, well, I think that's no disagreement there at all with Jeff. I agree with what you're saying, Jeff. I think that one of the big differences here is also what is happening at the state level. Is that we're passing state changes through either the legislature, but mostly through the ballot process. And voters are actually voting for these changes, and they're big changes. And so for further changes at a local level, especially at a rural counties, that tend to lean a little bit more conservative seems unlikely. But I think that that bigger environment of where we're already taking steps towards big changes. And there's always a hesitation and concern that these big changes will have negative impacts on public safety. And so it's a matter of time as well to work these things out before people are ready for the next step as well. But I think we're already in an environment where we're seeing we're making a lot of the changes that Larry Krasner talks about in that first episode. And I think what we are likely to see in this series is down the road that he's going to find it's very difficult to do this as a DA working in one city against, the establishment. So I think, to get these big changes and address the various objectives that one might have, you almost need to do it at the state level for it to be truly effective. It's going to be challenging to do it at the local level, especially for an outsider.
Yeah, just to make a couple of quick points, to Magnus's point, when we talk to local law enforcement, and a good example would be Reading Police on the issue of training of officers in the area of race relations and so forth. They're saying, yeah, when the state gives us this information, when it's mandated, when it's done by, we're going to follow that, right? So the action that happens at the state level definitely trickles down, if you will, to the local level. Letting legislation around things like chokeholds or what have you. Yeah, okay, that's the law. We're going to follow it. So it is important what happens at the state level. At the same time, our district attorney, Stephanie Bridget, someone I like very much and respect greatly. I don't see a Larry Krasner versus Stephanie Bridget, election going well for Larry, right? For somebody like Larry in our county, and that's really takes me to the third point. One of the real lessons of Philly DA is that this stuff is about politics, and we can have all of the moral rationale that we want to have. But if we don't have, 3 votes on the city council, 3 votes on the board of supervisors, enough votes in the state legislature to pass something, then reform isn't going to happen. And to make that happen, those elected officials have to believe that somebody's going to vote them out if they don't do, the right thing. So it really, when you start talking about the role of community organizations, it's around public education, and it's around mobilization, because the real truth of the matter is the things that people call progressive or radical or this or that. Actually, the truth is that, as Larry Krasner said, mass incarceration isn't exactly necessarily, a conservative strategy that is actually working. So what's going to work for the public? And if you can convince people of what makes sense, hopefully you can change attitudes.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure that we give some time to Robert and Raymond. So there is one question for Step Up. Are the inmates in jail who have not yet gone to trial eligible for the Step Up program and the day reporting center? What would you say, Robert? If he's...
The answer to that is an emphatic yes. So the way that our program works is we do have a number of folks that are pre-trial, but they are over either at the work release facility or they are out on their own recognizance with a GPS monitoring unit. Those folks are eligible. They can go to the Shasta College website and just type in Step Up, and we have a interest form that students can fill out and self-refer. That'll generate an email directly to myself, and we'll go from there. We also have referrals that come from probation or the sheriff's office or parole or one of the other organizations that we work with, the Rescue Mission, where students can go directly to us through those agencies as well. So
yeah,
we try not to say no to anybody.
Okay, so Raymond.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes, and I want to make sure that you share your experience. What can you talk about SOAR and curbing recidivism?
So I'm a member of a club called Students Overcoming and Alleviating Recidivism, and part of our mission is we're currently have become recipients of the public good. And so that we can become actually full and productive members of the public, as opposed to being on the other side of that, where we were, the people that needed to get locked up. And one of the things that I've started to notice is that okay, one of our goals is to try to overcome the stigmas that are attached to people like us who have been formerly incarcerated. Like, we tend to get viewed a little bit differently around the college structure, around the educational structure, around the employment structure. The stigma of, I mean, I've got tattoos, and I picked up habits and mannerisms from some of the places that I've been that are kind of difficult for me to just walk away from, and so as we're trying to overcome the stigmas that some people attach to us, I've come to understand and realize that we as a peculiar demographic tend to carry around a lot of stigmas within ourselves that we attach to law enforcement, that we attach to the public as a whole. And it wasn't until when I was sitting in jail the last time that I realized that the law enforcement folk who put me in that jail cell, they were actually ministers of the public good. And I came to understand that I needed to be where I was at. I needed that time to think about who I am and where I'm going with my life. I needed that little time out. I needed it, but I also needed something to happen afterward. And that's where I was involved in a program called the Behavioral Health Court in Tehama County. And at the end of the Behavioral Health Court, that's when I was offered a ticket to the Shasta College Step Up. And that transition made all of the difference in the whole entire world for me, because now not only am I a recipient of the public good, but I'm also becoming a functional member of that public good and a meaningful contributor to that public good, and so as I'm changing my perspective about who the people that are, like there was a question that I saw in the chat about the whole defund the police thing. I don't think defund the police is a good idea. What I think is that people need to be retrained on both sides of the issue. And so part of what our student-led organization is about is to try to help other formerly incarcerated and justice impacted students come to understand that well, the people of the state of California have voted. They believe that programs like this, they're not sure, but they think that maybe these programs might work better than incarceration. All right, so it's up to us as the recipients of these programs to come forth and put forth a stellar effort and to get the best grades we can get, and to learn how to conduct ourselves as appropriately and as professionally in the scholastic environment as we can, and ongoing into work, because we need to come back and be able to show these numbers. We need to be able to empower people like Robert to come back to the state with these kind of numbers, like, hey, look, these guys are succeeding when we do this for them.
Thank you, Curtis. Before I stop, I want to make sure that Magnus and Larry, if they can let the viewers know how they can, get involved with your organizations.
Sure, it's easy to find us. Just get on the web and go to ppic.org, and you'll find all the information about the research that we're doing. It's not only in criminal justice. We do a lot of work in education and the safety net. We do work on water, elections, and all those things. So ppic.org would be a great place to find more about us. You'll find the research that we're doing and all the staff that's part of the organization as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you'll find information at norcalunitedway.org. On our organization and upcoming on the coalition. Another thing that would be actually excellent to do would simply to be emailing me directly, and I will give you the hookup in terms of certainly the Equal Justice Coalition work. I'm L. Olmstead, LOLMSTEAD at norcalunitedway.org.
So you can see his name here. So L and his last name at United.
NorCalUnitedWay.org.
Norcal United Way.
NorCalUnitedWay.org. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think that's it. We had a lot of questions. We actually didn't go through all of them, but it's time for us. If you want information, you can reach Julie Driver. She will have the chat for the OVEE chat. She can send it to you. We also have Robert. If you want to get in touch with Step Up, you have Robert. You can email rbowman@shastacollege.edu, or if you put Step Up in the Shasta College website, you would have his email. And you can follow up with questions with Julie by emailing Julie if you want to reach any of the panelists, or if you have follow-up questions. That would be nice. Okay, thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Miriam.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.